Greetings to everyone who decided to join this channel again. This is Divine Destiny of Souls, and this is the fifth episode of our program, and here I'm continuing to tell the story of my shamanic awakening. So I ended the previous episode in the fall of 2020, and since I was introduced to Wilhelm, I was trying to establish connection with him, basically build the relationship as that's how I always do with the spiritual beings. That's just the best way to engage and just to gain the trust and sort of build confidence in the guidance that they're giving. And it was kind of always clear that I can trust Wilhelm. It was just kind of in there between us. I never kind of doubted him and questioned his integrity or his presence. And of course, the presence of my father often next to him was also quite supportive. But it became evident quite soon that Wilhelm is one of my main spiritual guides who would sort of direct my story and support me and provide the main guidance from the spiritual realm. And I have to explain at this point that the guidance that I received from my guardian angel Daniel about meeting an escort, and the guidance that I received later from my father and Wilhelm, although it was worded the same, it was actually the guidance about different women. So on my path, I was spiritually guided to meet three soulmates from past lives, and they were all sex workers, and I was always directed to meet them with a spiritual guidance, right? So in the same manner. So the guidance from my guardian angel Daniel was actually about my third soulmate that I met on my path, who is also my twin flame. That's just the broad description of our connection, but we basically represent the same light on Earth, and just sort of in the different polarities, right? But that's just the idea of twin flame, that we complement, our souls complement each other, and basically having the same aligned purposes and all that stuff. But to other women, they were just like my soulmates from past lives. One I knew for 7 lives, one I knew for 3 lives. And we had these karmic entangled connections, and so before I could meet my twin flame, which would happen almost 3 years after I received that guidance from guardian angel Daniel, I had to meet these 2 women. And of course, at that time, I didn't have that sort of distinction. For me, it was sort of just universal guidance, the same guidance, sort of to meet escort. And again, at that time, I didn't even understand that they were talking about a specific woman. I was just thinking it's just a broader guidance. That's why I puzzled through it, because it just didn't really make sense what was the purpose of it, right? So by October 2020, that guidance kind of continued to appear in my space, but I was sort of dealing with all the complexities of the life, and so by a certain moment, I was even thinking of going back to Ukraine because nothing worked, and I even had the thought that maybe my mission coming to Vancouver was to bring Veronica and sort of introduce her to Brian. And this is if I completed that mission, it means that maybe I should just go back, and at least I could earn potentially some money to buy some property, maybe, or land in the place of my father, right? In the same village, and sort of just move there. And especially it was in western Ukraine and almost on a higher, a furthest border from Russia. So the war wasn't an issue in my mind. But at the same time, it was, of course, just trying to escape my reality and deny what was happening to me. And when I kind of spoke with Veronica and saying basically the same things, is that I think maybe I should go to Ukraine, and I think maybe my mission was to bring you to Brian and get you guys meet. And she replied, if you going back to Ukraine, I'll go back with you. And I was surprised with that answer because, again, I didn't fully understand their relationship with Brian, right? But that answer kind of gave me clearer sort of explanation that she's struggling with that relationship and she doesn't know what it is, and that she's totally not convinced that she can sort of be with him. So I kind of like almost stepped back from sort of demanding any answer from her, like, or sort of make a solid decision. And we just continued to live like that. And then as we got closer to November elections, things got sort of like, I would say, heated up, just because it's been continuous sort of emotional strain on both of us, and sort of towards I think it was either the end of the October or early days of November, where we got in this like a huge fight at work with Veronica. I basically told her that I'm tired of living like that. I don't mind talking about Brian and trying to help her figure that relationship, but it's like either we sort of separate and then live as friends and continue sort of like to be in each other's lives, or like she has to like sort of decide and stay with me, for example, right? Like that was sort of very clear thing that I sort of started to demand from her, even though I knew that she's under the pressure and she wasn't in the space to make the decision emotionally, mentally, on all sort of levels. And I left that, like we got into fight and she has to stay in office to continue work, and I finished my day, and so I went home like completely frustrated, disappointed, angry, and sort of that anger kind of got me into the place of kind of like, okay, like you don't want to make a decision, I'll make a decision for you. If I have this like a spiritual guidance to go and see an escort, I'll go and see an escort, and that will sort of like be my, I don't know, like claim or sort of my way of communicating that I moved on from a relationship with Veronica, and I'm looking for something else, and just like being open to the world, let's say it like that. And of course, that was this also like an element of frustration that often men experience, right? Like, is that like too sort of when they got hurt emotionally, they trying to as well to find a way to hurt back their woman emotionally, even though it's often immature. But this is like how, unfortunately, sometimes things unravel, and like how you can sort of hurt your women. You can just like go and sleep with another woman. Again, something that men often engage with, and that's their way of kind of dealing with the stress, which is not a healthy way to address these issues, of course. But like I was so kind of, I felt feeling the roadblocks, feeling like just inadequate, basically, right, in my reality, and didn't understand what it is. And sort of like with that frustration, I was like basically going home on a bus and started to sort of trying to find an escort, right? Like the first time that I tried to sort of do this. And again, first of all, I didn't know how these things work. I didn't know about the Twitter space. I didn't know about the dedicated sites to escorts. I was just not aware about any of that. I think I Googled escorts Vancouver or something like that, or like an agency. And I got two places. I got like links to two places, and they were both kind of closed due to COVID restrictions. And I kind of felt again sort of disappointed. I'm kind of like, if I'm supposed to meet an escort, why I don't understand how to do that, and why it's sort of so challenging, right? I just like need to sort of like meet any random escort, and like, but at least I looked at the prices, and there was like something, usually it was between $300 to $400 an hour, and I kind of like thought that enough time would be at least 2 hours. So I was started thinking that like, yeah, I can sort of potentially find $700-800 to be able to do that, even though it wasn't ideal. But I kind of like still had jobs and contracts, and sort of was money was coming in, so I kind of like, okay, maybe I can find that amount without Veronica knowing about it. And yeah, just like these results never materialized into something solid, and I kind of like again let it go. I sort of got frustrated back again, and just angry, and then once the elections happen, well, we know what happened in that. We don't know, like physically, we don't know what happened between 3 and 4 a.m. During that night. But something definitely did, and it was obviously of the spiritual nature, not of the physical realm. And as we all woke up on the November 4th, we woke up to the completely different news and completely different reality that was expected on the November 3rd. And from that day on, like basically the 4th, I think the 5th, maybe a couple of days later, basically that guidance, you have to see an Escort, started to play in my head over and over again. And it wasn't a thought, it was like just directed at me, and it was sort of like very intense and rushing, and sort of like the time was running out sort of message. So I never experienced anything like that before, like the level of how it was sort of continuously presented to me. And not only Wilhelm and my father's soul Sergei was still coming with the same guidance, I started to feel the like a female presence, and at the same time, like I didn't had time, like couldn't distinguish who that was. It just was sort of like angelic presence, but of a feminine nature. And then later I realized that it was a soul of goddess or ascended master Mary Magdalene herself. Basically coming into my space and providing the same guidance, basically, right? She would eventually become my main spiritual teacher and guide on this journey, and she would sort of explain to me things and kind of like guided me and helped me to navigate that reality. And obviously, her being connected to the essence of sex work, that was something it was important, the guide who was important for me. But at that time I just like felt the feminine presence, and I couldn't like sort of distinguish her from others, and I didn't like pay attention to that. But she was also sort of like sending the waves, and it was more calming and more sort of compassionate. There was more love in that guidance compared to my masculine guides, of course. And sort of I kind of started to surrender to it more and more, but then I was also kind of like, there is some kind of urgency, so I don't know what it is. And then there were like a few days, like a couple of days, that it continued, and I was just like, I can't continue living like that. I just have to either like sort of commit to that guidance, or like just, I don't know what even to do. And soon enough, it became sort of like clear that it seems that something that I need to do, and seems something that I would be protected and saved on this journey, and this is just how it has to unravel, and this is some kind of like a doorway. So I'm in my place. Veronica was at work, and I kind of started to just Google again. And this time I sort of stumbled upon the Escort agency, which seemed to be working, and sort of opened the page and started to sort of like look on like rules and stuff like that, and just explanations, and then went to the page of companions, and I'm sort of scrolling through the page, and then I'm stopping on like there were like two images of women basically, and when you scroll, and they're two, and I stopped on one pair of women, and I kind of like looked at the one on the right, and she was described as like of Russian origin, and sort of just on the first glance, her body sort of was more appealing to me, let's say it like that. Just my eyes were drawn to her right away, and that. But then I started to kind of like logically think is that like if I need to meet an escort, it would be much easier to meet a Russian escort. I would at least be able to sort of relax more and maybe just explain to her what I was going through and like why I'm coming to see her. And once I thought that, like Wilhelm appeared right away in front of me, and he's kind of like he said the specific words, "You're not going there to have sex." And then he kind of like corrected himself. He said, "You're not going there just to have sex." And so at that moment, I'm kind of like, okay, why I kept avoiding that guidance? It definitely, this guidance is much more than just about sort of meeting an escort or having sex or just like sort of releasing my masculine frustrations. And so hearing his message, I kind of immediately understood that he was talking about the woman on the left, right? Like this sort of, and so I moved my eyes to her, and then I opened her page and started to scroll through the images, and the old faces are blurred, and so if I could see the eyes, I could at least sort of understand maybe if I know this person or something like that, right? Like that there is something more to that guidance. But as soon as I stumbled on a picture with her hands like basically placed upon the like couch or something like that, they were just like up front on the picture. I immediately had this thought: I know this woman just by looking at her fingers, and which was completely odd feeling, but it was so kind of like a solid, and it was just like intuitive, and it was in my heart, it was in my head, it was like everywhere basically around me. And I was like, I know this woman, I know this woman. I just started to say that out loud, and basically finally sort of became happy about that guidance, like that I kind of understood that there is much more to that than I originally thought, and that they basically guiding me to meet somebody who I supposed to meet. And this is just how it plays out. And knowing that Veronica met her soulmate, I kind of like, it makes sense that we would have sort of rhyming stories, and that's just another that Veronica's story was sort of as if another level of spiritual guidance or support on this path. It wasn't just a random coincidence. Just at that moment, that knowing was just very clear to me. But then again, I also kind of understood that if it's not about sex, then I should sort of meet this woman as a person, right? And so I talked to Wilhelm, and he's kind of like, yeah, you have to meet her for our dinner date. And in my mind was also like, I was sort of got calmer after I understood that, even though I realized that I would need more money. Like 4 hours with her was $1,400, and then on top of that you had to have a restaurant and some presents, so it was almost like up to $2,000 that I had to spend on that date, and which was something that I couldn't possibly afford in any sort of way. But then it was also this kind of like a feeling that, well, all of my knowledge about sex work at that time was like only that instance that I had in the youth, and then the rest was sort of the world of escorts. I only knew about that from movies, right? Like, and the main one was The Girlfriend Experience, which is like amazing movie and like just perfect Soderbergh movie, just classic Sundance style film, and just a classical American indie, almost like one of the pinnacles, I would say, even like on the of the American cinema, because of its cinematic qualities and like the way that it's shot and the storytelling, narration, and the editing, of course. And so in that movie, she's kind of like, she's a high-paying escort, and she's like usually meets clients before sort of proceeding with intimacy, and they kind of like sort of that's how I read it, at least, that she establishes the rules of engagement, and then they sort of proceed. And then my idea was is that like if it's a dinner date, then maybe we'll just like meet each other as a persons, like understand if there's like some chemistry or something like that, and that on that day we would only sort of establish our rules of engagement moving forward, and that like if it's a dinner date, I wouldn't have to sort of even think about sex, that she would just sort of, we would first talk about that part of the engagement. It's just something that I made myself to believe in, right? Like it wasn't sort of, there wasn't any guidance or anything like that, or like descriptions on the site. But that made me like believing in that made me sort of to calm down at least, and sort of not be not expecting to feel the same feelings, whether I'm like pressuring her to sex or something like that, all these concerns that I had before. And so I booked the same time, like once I discovered it, because I was super excited. I kind of like called to agency and booked the date on the November 14th. So that booking happened on November 8th. So it was basically just a week from that day. It was Monday, and then like we booked it on Saturday. And the November 13th was that there was also new moon, and was kind of like sort of the day was supported by Wilhelm as well, for a channel of our meeting, the way that like he sort of posed it. And so the same evening, Veronica returned from work, and we kind of like just had our evening, and then we went to bed, and we just like lying there in the darkness, sort of like preparing to sleep. And I'm kind of like, there is no way around it. I can only sort of, even though I booked it already, I kind of like, I still need to ask her permission, because it was something, not only that, something that I believe spouses should tell to one another, because we were still living as spouses. But then also like, of course, as we always were honest with each other, but then on top of that, I just simply couldn't afford it without asking Veronica for money. Basically, at the time we had joint finances, and we only had like a savings account with $4,000. Basically, all the paychecks that we were getting would like just cover our expenses, like day-to-day living. So it wasn't like I didn't have extra money. Only the extra money that we had was then in that savings account, basically. These money in the savings account were actually the money we received, like overpaid in the COVID sort of help that everybody received, and we didn't know if we need to return it or not. And eventually it like turned out that we do need to return some of that later on. But at that time, it was sort of the only way to cover this expense, and sort of we lie in there at night, and I kind of like slowly start to tell Veronica the entire story, that I received this guidance from my guide, and that my father supported it, and the Wilhelm came to support it, and that I know that I need to meet this woman because I know her from past lives. That was my argument, and that like it's important part of my education, of our story. And that the only way for me to pay that was from our savings account. And of course, I told her a little bit less money, just not to freak her out, and sort of to cover the rest with my paycheck. But she was still kind of shocked and surprised. But then we continued talking about it, and she kind of like understood that it wasn't frivolous decision at all, and that was something that also gives me a lot of stress and concern and worry, and that I'm not like happy doing that, but it's just like something that I just need to do. And I guess because of the way that like our communication was back then, and that Veronica felt sort of a little bit of guilt, I guess, the way that sort of our story played out, she kind of just agreed to that, and she's like, okay, if this is something that you need to do, go ahead and do it, and like just basically we'll talk about it, and we'll see what it is. And that like it was presented to me that I would just like meet her for the one time, right? Like, and it was sort of seemed like an investment in my education, and of course, like spiritually, if you can understand that, if I was sort of at that time, I was demanding from my guides from Vancouver, from Lance, from everybody, to sort of guide me to my shamanic awakening, or to find the door of my empowerment, or just like basically I was in the process of rediscovering myself. I wanted to understand who I am, right now, and what do I need to do on my path moving forward. And nothing was materializing, and so of course I was sort of like almost started to demand things to kind of at least show me that door, right? And that's in order to be able to sort of do that by spiritual laws. You have to present a sacrifice, right? Like you have to present some sort of like a you have to give something away to be able to enter that door. And Wilhelm also like continued to tell me that that the money that I'm spending was not the money that I'm spending on an escort, but rather the money for my education. And I saw the reason in that. I saw the kind of like understanding in that, but also I was kind of very kind of curious to understand who this woman is and why we're guided to meet. And so we kind of continued to talk a little bit about that over the coming days with Veronica. And then on Thursday of that week, so it was like November 12th maybe, I'm seeing this dream, and this entire dream basically, I'm seeing how I'm finding myself in the forest, and it's just night, pitch black. You can't barely see anything. I don't have my glasses, and there was a strange feeling of that forest, is that I didn't know that forest physically. I never been to that place physically, but I kind of understood that it's a real place and that it feels like home. And it's like a very strange feeling that I experienced, that like I know this forest, or like I need to find this forest, or I need to be in this forest. That was just like right in the dream. And then slowly after in the dream, I started to see this figure of a woman, and that was basically the soul of this escort. We can call this woman Jessica. This is how I describe her in the writings. Of course, I don't know her real name to this date, and I sort of can't use her professional name. That's the only name that I knew. So Jessica would be the best description that I have right now, sort of identify her at least. And so I'm seeing the soul of Jessica, and even though she looks a bit different than on the pictures, I know that it's her. But it's basically like a silhouette, and it's like all blurry, and it's almost like a mist. And she reaches out and takes my hand and starts to walk sort of through the forest, and sort of I'm walking beside her, like almost behind her. And sometimes we hold hands, sometimes we just continue to walk, and like she's sort of like walking and guiding me to something. And then soon enough I started to see the shore of Seashell Inlet, which again I never physically visited, and at that moment I didn't know that it was a Seashell Inlet. But we ended up in the actual physical place that does exist, and this forest does exist, even though, of course, in the dream it was sort of, even though I had this inner knowing that this is a real place, I was still kind of just thinking, oh, maybe it's just my imagination. So we ended up on the shore, and the sun starts to rise, and it's like a beautiful sunset, just the most amazing sunset, and just like everything sparkles and everything is luminous. And she kind of like she doesn't turn around, and she's kind of like, oh, I guided you to where you need to be. And then she turns and looks at me, and I see her eyes for the first time, the same eyes that like Jessica has, and the same eyes that her soul has. And once we kind of locked our eyes in that dream, she's like, no, I'm actually going to stay with you here. I don't need to leave anywhere. I need to be with you. And she sort of settles on my shoulder, and we start to cuddle and just looking at the sunrise. And I just like has this knowing, I know the eyes of this woman. I'm seeing her soul. So I woke up on the next day, it's Friday, and I'm kind of like, this is just it was such a romantic and beautiful and just such an intimate dream. And it was this like entire story of our journey, basically, like digested in the dream, right? Like, is that she basically was telling me that there's going to be this time of darkness, and we would walk through that forest, not seeing where we're going, not knowing what we're doing, not seeing basically each other, but then ending up on the shore, sort of the empowerment, the sunrise is the empowerment, right? Like the sunrise is sort of arriving to myself, or to our best versions, both me and her. And it was Friday, so I was supposed to meet Jessica on the following day, and we're having dinner at home with Veronica that evening, and we basically spent the entire evening like talking about this. and she basically like started to ask like, how do you feel and all of that, and then she's kind of like in her classical Veronica Oracle feminine power, she sort of like almost starts to channel the extra guidance to me, and she's kind of like, I see that you will fall in love with her tomorrow, but then she will not accept her love because she's sort of like I don't exactly remember the words that she used. It's sort of like she's sort of broken or traumatized girl, and she wouldn't be able to sort of accept your love, and nothing will sort of be after that, and you're just gonna break your heart. And so maybe like just don't go, because you will break your heart and you'll be hurt. And it was very, very sort of caring and like loving message. It wasn't there was nothing like kind of, it wasn't about the money, it wasn't about our relationship. She knew but that by that time that I had to meet this woman just because. And I kind of like heard her message, and I like basically replied, I know all of that exactly the way that you said. I have the same exact feeling that this is how it will unravel. But at the same time, I told Veronica that I still need to go and do it, and I'm going to do it not because I need a woman or sex or love or like anything like that, but I need to check my spiritual guidance, because I have a faith in myself, and I have a faith in my story and everything that unravels. And sort of I was basically checking up my faith rather than looking for something or like expecting something from a woman. And that if it's gonna sort of unravel in the way that Veronica explained, then it's fine. Then it means that I need to break my heart, and that I told her that the heart is designed to be broken. That's the entire purpose of a heart, is to sort of, through that crack, the light of divinity, more love, more forgiveness, more compassion comes through. And this is how we are designed, and I supposed to go through it, and that this is the story of my spiritual awakening. And I know that something will change very significant after I meet her. And sort of we had this almost, the ending of our evening was quite sad and a little bit maybe even somber, just like basically knowing that we're not going to have the same lives, and just sort of another element of grief, but also sort of like a sadness that this is how things will play out. So on November 14th, I went to the Botanist restaurant where we made the reservation for dinner at 8 p.m. And I got to the table at the exact time, and Jessica was a bit late. And basically, like, I met her at the reception, and yeah, haven't had a chance to like look at her properly, and just like basically guided her towards the table. But once we sort of like settled at the table and I looked at her eyes for the first time, I fell in love right away. And it was that love at first sight, even though like there was this like a small moment in between. But yeah, if I even seen her eyes at the reception, it would be the same sort of emotion. But once I could like sort of look at her eyes, I could see the same eyes that I saw in the dreams, in the dream a couple of nights before. But it was also sort of like this exact the same feeling that I had when I sort of saw. When I recognized the eyes of Veronica, it just, that feeling was more intense, and it happened right away. And we kind of like started talking about different things right off the bat, sort of just trying to fill the space right away. And from that sort of first moment, I'm kind of like, not only that I know this woman, and not only that I like fall in love with her at first sight, but that I didn't believe in love at first sight at that moment. And I kind of like, if I have this feeling, it means that something very significant happened to us in past life. It was just kind of like, again, intuitive knowing. And by now I kind of know that this is the sort of what love at first sight actually is that you sort of recognize the soul that you know from past life, but that you made an intention in the previous life to remember this person right away. for whatever reasons they may be. Like in our spiritual connection, it was sort of like a karmic thing. But that's like how Camilla, in a previous life, sort of that was her last thought before her death, is that like, I want to remember her, I want to remember her. And in Camilla's life, sort of Jessica was Eloise, lived as Eloise, and she was actually the love of Camilla's life. And of course we didn't know that at the time, but that was the sort of that feeling of like falling in love at first sight. It was that. And so we quickly started to talk about quite complex things, even though like I was also sort of taken aback that this woman was like 14 years younger than me. She was basically turning 23 that December, as she told me. And I was like 38 by that, 38, yeah, I guess by that time. But it wasn't like just 14 years difference. It just felt as if it's more, like she felt, not because of her intelligence. She was very smart, educated, and kind of like interesting woman. She like knew so many things and was curious about spirituality and all that kind of stuff, and could support like basically any conversation. So she was like quite intelligent, but it was still that almost like a feeling, like that she's kind of like, she could have been my daughter, almost that. And that these feelings kind of like also took me aback, because I did find her extremely attractive, but not like physically, but because I sort of recognized her soul. So that's why I was like sort of had these like romantic and passionate feelings, and of course wanted to embrace her. And so we kind of like, and so having these completely conflicted thoughts, and just remembering the Veronica's guidance and remembering the dream, I kind of was in very, very strange place. But we kind of, our conversation was flowing, just unrestricted, with just one topic after another. We couldn't like stop talking, we couldn't stop laughing, we couldn't stop sort of like engaging. We kept talking about my spiritual movies, what I do, like my spiritual perceptions. I told her that I did these 2 past life regressions, and she looked at me very interestingly, and she's kind of like, are you gonna do more of these? And it was this kind of like how woman would ask a question with her intuition, meaning that she implies that there's something more to it, even if you don't see it, right? Like, and I kind of read it right away. But I replied kind of, I don't think I'm going to do these past life regressions because they're too confusing, and I don't see the reason why I should. And of course, like, her intuition was basically telling me that I would need to explore all of my past lives because just to understand who she is. She was supposed to sort of guide me to that, right? Like to sort of direct me into that spiritual work. And so yeah, and then I just like kept telling her that like it was clear that something happened to us in Paris, and sort of I started to talk about Paris, and I started to talk about France, and she was talking about how she's been drawn to Monet paintings, and I kind of like the way that she described her sort of drawn to that. It was clear that it was some kind of like a past life connection, and I told her that this is how you sort of understand that this is the memory of past life, when you sort of like feel so strongly about something, and like you feel that you kind of like deeper connection or recognize something. And I told her how to recognize sort of a person from past lives, because I had that experience with Veronica, but I kept sort of avoiding telling her, of course, about my feelings, and I kept avoiding telling her that I sort of met her soul, or that I know for sure that I know you from past lives. And sort of and our conversation continued to happen, and then it was sort of just waiter coming to us and saying like our restaurant is going to close, and we look at the hours. It was almost like 10:15 or something like that, and she's kind of like, Jessica's like, oh, we're running out of time. We kind of like, I also need to get to my in-call and all of that. And I'm kind of like, okay, yeah, sure. And we were waiting for the check, and I kind of like giving her the present because I couldn't never had a chance. I just kind of showed it to her, but never like kind of explained. And about the present, it was very strange thing because I went to a couple of days before. I'm kind of like, I just need to bring her something, a sort of another offering. But I just bought like a bottle of French champagne that I knew that Philip was selling. That was a Piper Hydwick, or I don't remember how the brand is. Piper Hide and Seek. Anyway, that's the brand that Philip was trading back in France, and I knew that like it was a sort of soul kind of connection, right? Like for me when I bought that bottle, and I just like bought a salt for the bath, just like simple things that like would never sort of fail. And then I was kind of in the space of almost, I need to find her present. That she would remember me for, something like that. Like the thought was like quite weird because I was convinced that it's just going to be one meeting, and then I wanted to be something personal and something like intimate that we almost like both recognized, but I couldn't understand that it was actually her soul already guiding me at that point. So I went to like, I started to just go to different stores and just like browsing around, and maybe I'll find something, and I ended up in a bookstore. And just before, like 6 weeks before that, Lana Del Rey released her poetry book. And I was like, at that time, I was sort of kind of starting to discover Lana Del Rey for myself. I wasn't ever like listening, but it was that fall. It was another sort of element because it's another sort of soul and spiritual connection, and when I sort of opened up these past lives, that energy kind of also brought Lana Del Rey's music into my space. And so when I sort of stumbled upon that book, I was kind of like, this is a great idea. Like she's sort of a young woman, and she'll probably appreciate it. And if not, like if she wouldn't like it, at least she would find something in it. It's at least it's some kind of like a present that sort of anybody can find something for them in there. And sort of and it was also that kind of like a intuitive understanding that I almost like building a spiritual bridge with Jessica through these poems, that if I'll buy a one copy for myself and one copy for her, when I'm going to be reading that, like we're almost like going to be reading it together, and it's going to be sort of this metaphysical astral bridge between us, and we'll be connected through that poetry. And it's also very important to like acknowledge that I was never into poetry. I never wrote poetry. I was never interested in poetry. I always thought that poetry is quite snobbish. And there was also this element of like Russian poetry, is that like because sort of Russians are obsessed with their poetry, and they shoving down that poetry to kids in school, to the extent that you like started to reject it and sort of like I almost hate it, like just can't stand it because there's so much, and most of that poetry is sort of like from 18th century, 19th century, the time that like just doesn't resonate to us, and that it's also always rhyming, which is also like quite annoying. But when I found the book of Lana, I was kind of like, this is the poetry that I can read. I can sort of relate to her. For some reason, I just like her rhymes, her style of poetry, and the book is just, I don't know, like I don't need to say anything about it. The book speaks for itself because it's such a unique poetry book and such a unique collection, because it's written in all sorts of styles, and one of my most favorite poems are in that book. And I just like think that Lana does something with that English language that's just something that, I don't know, nobody else does. Even though I read many great poets later on, like she still resonates with me like completely differently, and it's just again because of that sort of soul vibration, soul connection. The similar, like she basically has Lana Del Rey soul has a similar archetype to our souls, and that's kind of like why her songs like speaks to us, and poetry speaks to us in such a way. And so back in that dinner date, I'm kind of like, we have this space kind of in between. We ended on a conversation. We're still waiting for the check, and she's kind of like, oh, can I look at the present? What's there? And I'm kind of like, oh, there's nothing. There's basically bath salt, champagne, and a book of Lana Del Rey's poetry. And Jessica is like kind of raising her eyes at me like in complete disbelief. She's kind of like looking at me and saying like, how did you know? Why did you bought that book? And I'm kind of like, oh, well, what's the deal? And she's kind of like, I was dreaming about that book all the time. I was kind of waiting for it and like never had a chance to sort of buy it. And she was like in completely disbelief. She was thrown off. She was confused. She was clearly experiencing some kind of feelings, right? Like at that moment, because we had this like a deep connection. We ran out of time. She lost track of time. I lost track of time. It was that kind of like a conversation that inspires, conversation that uplifts, conversation that just like sort of, it was a soul conversation, right? Like it was that kind of connection between us, and that sort of almost that realization that I brought that book was almost like locked all of that in her head in like completely different way. And she was almost like become a different person, but like very, very feminine and soft, and like just it was such an unusual moment. And sort of we both almost like confused, left this place around 10:30, got a cab. Thankfully it was just a few minutes away. We got to her in-call, and so when I like sort of she asked me to wait a couple of minutes and just like not walk in with her. And so when I sort of walked around the block, it was a little bit of rain. I kind of like gathered my thoughts, got up, and sort of entered the space, and it was like getting like we basically had a little bit more than an hour left at that moment. And I was like still so in my sort of belief that, oh, we will just sort of talk, like just sit on a couch and talk for that hour, because the time was running out and there was no point in my perception of rushing things. But it was like she was completely in the different sort of headspace. She was almost like anticipating that, and I just like couldn't read it properly. So she sort of, when I got my jacket off and the shoes, and she's kind of like, she invited me to use the shower, and we enter into bathroom, and she sort of like shows me where things are. And before leaving, she just like jumps upon me and like just gives me this like a big long kiss, very passionate and very kind of honest, I would say. I don't know, like it's people can sort of claim that it was just sort of part of her program and this is something that she does. Maybe she did, but you know when the kiss is real, like you know when it's sort of just there. You know the variations of kisses while once you get to the certain age, right? Like, and you know variations of feelings and all these things when you're an adult. So it was kind of, it threw me off completely. Like I was by that time, I was like, after that kiss I was completely infatuated with her because the kiss was real. It was clear to me that she was like sort of inviting me, right? And sort of, and I stopped thinking about like talking. I was just like kind of, yeah, I want to embrace this woman. I just like, I feel so much love for her, and I like just know her, and it seems that she's responding to me in a similar way. And sort of she went to the bedroom, and I sort of showered and exited the place and went to bedroom. And as I step into the bedroom, she's sort of sitting on the edge of the bed in lingerie, and I look at her and I like see the beautiful woman that she is, but I also see another woman in her as almost like a halo, like an astral being, almost like, you know, like a Avengers type of thing, but it's almost like two women in one. It's almost like another energy body of another woman in her. And everything becomes dark, and I see, and basically I was seeing Eloise, right, like from the previous life. So she's like a tall, like Jessica was maybe, I don't know, 160, 165, and Eloise was like 185, and she had blonde hair, and she had like a Russian looking face, Russian, like a Slavic heritage, basically, ancestry. And I was completely thrown off. I'm kind of like, what's going on? What am I seeing? And everything became dark, and then I'm seeing how the knife goes into the back of Eloise around her left shoulder, and like just few stabs happening in that place, and that this knife starts to peel her skin, and it's like a knife going through under, from her shoulder down to her waist and through her breasts, and kind of like that, and just the blood just streaming, and the knife is just peeling. I don't see who's doing that, but I'm just like seeing how the skin is being peeled away, and I was like completely in shock. I was like, and that image, it happened briefly. It was like just a moment, I don't know, like a few seconds maybe, but it took me aback in such a weird way. I was like, I didn't know what I was experiencing. This entire journey was like so confusing and so kind of like rich in detail and so kind of dense. Like everything was like thick, and it was always kind of, everything that happened with that was so intense, and kind of like distilled almost. And I'm kind of, I don't know how to proceed with that, and she sort of starts to invite me to sit next to her. I'm kind of like, I'm just being just awkward, clumsy, kind of very reserved, don't know what to do, like getting off the like undressing, just doesn't know what to do, like what to expect. There is definitely my expectations about conversation just disappeared. She was clearly sort of proceeding with her routine, but it was clear that the excitement of sort of being intimate with her was in her eyes as well. Like I was just seeing that clearly. It wasn't something that I was just inventing and trying to project upon her. It was there, and sort of. But then she kind of like continues to undress, and then she sort of asks me to if she can take my underwear. She takes my underwear, and she reaches out to sort of to do oral sex as a first part of her routine. And I'm kind of like, I have very complicated relationship with that kind of type of sex, and just it's very hard to surrender to it when sort of when the woman is not sort of fully prepared to do that, or prepared to sort of like to do that in an empowering way, and you always feel that. And so that's why I try to avoid it altogether, just not to have these like conflicting feelings and not being able to surrender. And the thing with oral sex is quite simple. There are some women who like it and some women who don't. There is like not right or wrong answer. But the thing is that about this culture is that not only that women are expected to give oral sex, which is like not even in this culture, it's not even like oral sex, it's called blowjob. That's what it is in their in the North American definition, which is completely different from empowering oral sex, which can be called fellatio, or like maybe some other words can be found for that. But it's you have to understand that these are completely two different types of engagement, because the nature of oral sex in this culture is that not only women are expected to give it always, they are also expected to look up at the man, and man is expected to play a role that he's kind of like looking down upon her and like love domineering. And that's like the entire purpose of that engagement, of like that he's putting her down and she's happy that he's putting her down, and they both playing this role. And of course, like kind of, it's not my culture. It's not something that like in healthy sexuality, expressions of healthy sexuality, and it's kind of like when you feel that woman doesn't want to do it but she still does it, you just completely can't surrender to it. And then the other element in my perception is that a man can only surrender to empowering oral sex is when it's presented as a ceremony and a ritual, and he knows that this is going to be the part of engagement, and he knows that he kind of like deserved it on some level. It can be different interpretations of that, but there should be that element if we're talking about empowering engagement of that sort. And obviously, if it's done in the form of like a ritual or ceremony, the woman also understands that, and her empowerment comes from that realization, is that there is some kind of like a reward for him that she knows he kind of like deserved, and then there is like an element of devotion, admiration, and sort of like a empowering service, if it makes sense. But it all comes with the presence, it all comes with the sort of dedication that she will receive the spiritual sort of blessings and rewards through that experience herself. Like the main thing is that like the opening of her throat chakra and just like connection with the divinity, like right, like with the sort of God energy represented in this masculine form that she's engaged with. And in that type of a scenario, when both partners sort of like know what it is, and then they sort of dedicated a time for that ritual, and it's like a sort of rare occurrence, right? Like that's where a man can fully surrender, and a woman can also like sort of fully surrender to that devotional ceremony, and that both partners receive sort of spiritual rewards for that, and like build deeper connection. This is what I'm talking about, the empowering oral sex, and that's why I'm like specifically telling the distinction between the way the blowjob and the oral sex. And so this was clearly blowjob, and it was not only that, like I was kind of, okay, this is just something that they do, it's like I can't stop her, she was just like, if she's sort of doing that, I'm just gonna surrender to it. Like she didn't ask for my consent, obviously, she just expected like that every man is expecting and wanting that from her. But I was in that kind of like a place because just again, everything was so confusing. I was infatuated with her, and I'm kind of like, I'm just gonna sort of allow her to do whatever she does. And it was also interesting that when we were in the dinner, I kind of like told her that I never seen escorts before, and but I received the guidance that like you would guide me through this way, through this journey in an empowering way. And I kind of like hinted at my dream about walking through the woods, but I kind of presented it to her that it's kind of, this is the story of our night, is that it's going to be sort of like a confusing, but you would guide me to the light sort of thing, right? Like this is how I kind of explained it to her. And she said, yeah, don't worry, you're in good hands, like we'll figure it out, and everything's going to be sort of fine. And so this was one of the other reasons I'm kind of like, I'm just sort of try to surrender to it. And sort of like she proceeded, and I tried to like fully sort of accept it. And I closed my eyes and kind of like just trying to relax. And I just, not only that I couldn't surrender because I wasn't in a place to accept it, but I also started to feel that she doesn't like doing it as soon as she started. And then as I'm lying with the clothes, and I'm kind of like, okay, I'm just going to endure it. She'll stop eventually. But then I'm having this thought, open your eyes, open your eyes, open your eyes, look at me. And it's basically, she was sort of telling that to me mentally, emotionally. And I'm opening my eyes, and she sort of looks at like, still continue doing that, but looks at me sort of directly in my eyes, exactly how they do it in porn. And I sort of always kind of rewind that if I ever engage in porn, these moments, because I like, it's again, they, not only that it doesn't serve any sort of empowering purpose, not only that it's not a pleasurable experience when a woman is forced to do that. There's literally no pleasure at all. It's more irritation, confusion, just frustration, and you kind of like just endure it. but on top of that, there is like this weird element in blowjobs, this weird element of intentional humiliation of a woman. That's how it's presented in porn, that's how it's presented in the society, and that's how it's expected from women here. And for some reason they're forced to like learn oral sex like as early as possible. You constantly hear the stories how women in their like when they're like 14, 15 years old, they're bullied and forced to do these oral sex blowjobs as part of like sort of initiations into their like whatever. I don't even understand these things, but like basically if you want to belong in our circle, you have to do that, right? Like that kind of like a thing. And then I heard the stories of women who were like forced to do that when they were not ready, just to be able to sort of like not be bullied in class, you know, like just continue to do the education. And like these stories to this day like confuse me, and I would never accept that this is the advanced or kind of like progressive or like healthy society when this is the reality of many women, that they end up finishing the school with intense sexual traumas for no reason whatsoever, just because they're trying to sort of like study, just because they want to graduate the school. They need to endure this. I remember one woman told me like when she was 14, she was forced to do a blowjob to a complete stranger on the transit bus, as again the part of the initiation into sort of like some sort of like a female club or like whatever they do, like these groups of women. You're not part of us if you don't do that kind of type of thing. Something that I can't accept to this day, and something that I would like definitely vocally would prefer fighting against, because it's kind of like it's and God only knows what they force women to do in the college and stuff like that, right? That's also sort of like if in a healthy society, in like previous empowering societies, women would like during that time they would have sort of empowering rites of passages where they would discover their purpose, understand their soul, understand their talents. Right now, these rites of passages is just basically, you know, like forcing women to do sexual acts against their will, to break their sort of, again, to traumatize their souls, to create soul dissociations and just confuse them with the norms of sexuality that like are completely foreign to their nature. And of course there is like I don't know where it comes from, because like I'm coming from Russia, where there's like a sort of such a huge percentage of population went through prison system, and kind of there's a lot of culture in the music and like in films and everywhere the prison kind of like system, and everybody is aware about the famous Russian tattoos made in prison. Well, like that's like another type of art almost. But like this enforcement of blowjobs upon young women is exactly the same. Like that, it is rooted in the prison type of mentality, which is like weird, because I don't see, you know, like I don't see the same sort of struggles. I don't see the same challenges in society. I don't see the same amount of population coming through the prison system. But it's always like a locker room or prison type of humiliation ritual, basically, that and that again, another huge element is that like not only that woman is expected to be humiliated through that, that you as a man is expected by her and by society to sort of look down upon her and kind of like revel in that and enjoy it. And she's kind of like that you're domineering and that you're getting this like a unique pleasure, which again, if a woman is not enjoying the process, if she's not doing that willingly, if it's her boundary not to do this, it can never be pleasurable. I just don't understand how, like where men find pleasure in that. Where is that point? You know, only if you play in a game of that kind of like that you sort of expect it to be playing, right? And so I open my eyes and she looks directly at me, at my eyes, and I completely like freak out because it's so unnatural. It's so kind of like just doesn't feel right. I don't know even how to explain it, and I just immediately just pull back and sort of push her away and asking her to stop. And it's just completely ruined the mood and just like the feeling and just the flow of everything. And it was clear, like from, it's just again a very intuitive feeling that I have, is that like when a woman engages that and she doesn't want it, I just feel it right away, and then it's like it's completely ruined for me. And so I felt that right away from her, and I immediately kind of like sort of was thrown back, because this is like the woman that I love, this is my soulmate, and that she sort of apparently does that with every client, but it's not her boundary. Like, she's okay with being an escort, she's okay with being companion, she's empowered in that, she's okay even to have sex, and she's empowered in that as well. There is an element for her, but specifically for her, the blowjob is a boundary that she doesn't like, and she would have preferred to avoid if it was empowering sex work, if she would sort of creating the rules. But she was just a young girl brought up in this like a fucked up society with this like demanded rules of engagement, and it's evident that she was not only probably went through the same humiliation rituals while she was in high school, but also like that she was brought up on porn, and that I guess, I don't know like how it like sort of works, but there are some kind of women who are already experienced in the craft, right? If you sort of step into the escort agency, they kind of like tell you sort of the flow, the framework, basically, you know. So it was clear that it's like the rules of engagement, or how, I don't know, how the women in this particular agency or just in general engage with clients, that was sort of, in my understanding, was related to her, and she just was sort of following the script or routine, as I say. And then again, that the way that she did it was that like almost everybody's expecting that, like why even like to sort of ask, or like why to sort of even what's the issue, right? And so I was seeing and thinking all these thoughts right there and then, and kind of like just to sort of don't know what else to do, and then kind of like seeing how she sort of keeps sort of doing the things that are not empowering for her, and like sort of ruining her boundaries. And I also want to say that like right away in the restaurant, you know, like when I sort of started to only look at her eyes, there was this element of like huge sadness and grief in her that I could like sort of relate to. I like, of course, I didn't know that it was the anxiety from past lives and we shared the same grief, but I couldn't like understand it. And it was this almost at certain point in conversation in the beginning, especially until she kind of like opened up to me and sort of we started to engage in all these interesting topics. It was this element of kind of like, I'm tired of doing this. I'm kind of like, I almost want this to be end, and I almost like want my death to appear. She was like completely, she looked lost, and she looked kind of almost drained, right? Like she looked as burned out. Like this is how, like this is what usually people say. And when I was sort of, when we were sitting on the bed after that sort of initial routine and looking at each other, kind of like I started to see her energy body, like aura, that it was completely like depleted and in holes. Right, I mentioned that I did the same work for Veronica, so I knew how it looks, how the traumas of the energy body looks, and she had much more damaged energy body than Veronica had when I met her, and I'm kind of like, I just completely freaked out. I'm kind of like, what this woman had to endure to have such damaged energy body. And because like when you had that such a depleted state of aura, all kinds of energies, you know, like somebody just like told you something unpleasant, and that almost can become a negative energy that penetrates you and like just like rips out and continues to destroy energy body. So it's very important to sort of like have this spiritual cleansing in sex work and just like sort of detach all the spiritual cords from past lovers. But it was evident that she went through the series of humiliations, and that her soul was not connected to her really at that time, and that her energy body was depleted by men who sort of like just exploit her. And that's like how energy body is being depleted. And her phallic energies were also depleted. And in both with phallic energies and the energy body or aura, it's kind of like when this woman was always have this sense, like women have this intuitive sense after sex, like, oh, I was used. If women had that kind of like intuitive thought or like feeling or emotion, it usually means that like her aura signifies that this man just took more from her that he gave away, right? Like, so the sexual engagement is the empowering sexual engagement is that like nobody's taking anything away from each other. We're on the opposite, exchanging the positive vibrations and destroying through orgasm and through sexual act, destroying all the negative vibrations, right? Like this is the empowering sex, and then we're exchanging positive energies with each other to strengthen the energy body. And this is the empowering sexual work. This is what the temples of sexual healing arts throughout the time, the service that they provided is that the strengthening of the aura or the energy body, because if you sort of had that energy body strong, like you're not living in fear, you live in your truth, you're not kind of like you just going through the life more smoothly, if it makes sense. And the energy body is kind of like, it's almost like a quantum double of our physical body, so it holds all our sort of memories, emotions and things like that, but it's also sort of creates this energy field around us that protects us. But if the energy body is depleted and in holes, like every single new abuse, even every single critique can be very destructive. And that's why this woman wanted to die, because she was like sort of so burned out and so depleted. And I'm so like sitting there with her and kind of like just doesn't know what to do, understanding that. And I had this like thought of like, oh, what if she would like just give me a chance to do the same energy work that I did on Veronica? I can sort of heal her. What if she could only like give me that chance? And of course, like I had that understanding that I wouldn't be able to like pay for the sessions, right? Like coming forward, and it was just this like aspiration or a hope, like, and it was so genuine, and it was coming from like my heart of a healer. Is that like, oh, I see a wounded person, I want to help them. Beyond that, I'm so in love with her, you know, like I'm have such a strong feelings towards this woman. I know her soul. And then we kind of like sit a little bit in silence, and she doesn't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And then I sort of we look each other in the eyes, and our eyes are locked. And we kind of started smiling at each other, and she looks at me and just kind of like, I know you. And once she said it first time, she said it 2 more times, I know you. And each time it was more excitement. Is that like, oh, I do really know you. That kind of like a feeling that she almost like tried to tell that to herself, and that she was surprised with that realization that she just knows me, that she recognizes my eyes. And right then and there, I replied, I know you too. And something that I just wanted to tell her from the beginning of our conversation, from the beginning of when I saw her eyes. And now I had my chance of like tell her the same thing. And then after that, it was just like, it felt like she leaned to me, we started again kissing and kind of like embracing each other, and like it just felt, it didn't feel as like just being a client and a provider. It just like, it felt so natural. It felt so kind of just two man and a woman who like just sort of were drawn to each other, have this chemistry, and just decided to collide in intimacy. Then we started kissing and like sort of like rolling in the bed, and sort of continuing the process. And she said something that like I never recognized about myself. She also like, after some kissing, she looks in my eyes and kind of like I haven't seen the eyes that are changing colors. Are your eyes changing colors? Like I never seen something like that. It was this kind of like, again, recognition of my eyes, and I never kind of noticed that about my eyes, that they do change colors in different lighting. And I also like evidently discovered that trait in my previous lives as well. So this is just something that like, and nobody ever told me that before, and I kind of like was so kind of surprised when she said that. But it was also another, I read it as another sort of element of recognizing of my soul, right? Like that's sort of, again, another invitation to embrace her. And sort of proceeded with sex and kind of just sort of there was nothing special in terms of like, I know it was good sex, I'm not like trying to say anything bad about it, but it was a sort of still kind of like a very confusing thing. And the first time, of course, it was always kind of like always awkward with a new partner, but it still was kind of, there was a lot of passion, there was a lot of sort of intimacy, there was a lot of connection in that way. And then we kind of lied in the bed, sort of having pillow talk and just cuddling. And I'm kind of like completely infatuated with her, completely like can't sort of understanding that the time is running out and that I need to go and I sort of can't go. And that we have these like last moments, and I'm trying to savor them, and I start to tell her about her fingers. That when I saw, I didn't tell her that like your fingers, I remember them from past life. I was just started to tell her that when I saw them in the picture, I was completely drawn to them, and they're like sort of beautiful. And she's kind of like just dismissed it and said like there's nothing special about my fingers, why you're drawn to them. But that was another like very cute and kind of like romantic moment. And it was just this feeling that I want to continue seeing this woman somehow. I want to have a romance with her. Like that was my sort of feeling. And of course I didn't know how it was possible, but that was just how I wanted our connection to continue. So our time has ended, and I started to sort of get dressed, and I was in the corridor, just a hallway, and trying to get my jacket and shoes. And she kind of, while I was doing that, she kind of looked at the first she kept asking me to take off my glasses and put them on, and she couldn't decide. She wanted to try to understand if I was cuter without glasses or with them, which was also quite intimate and romantic. I never experienced something like that. And she didn't decide basically in the end. She said she liked both. And then while I was dressing up, she kind of like looked at the bag and just, got the champagne and the bath salt. And then she took off the book. And she like looked at me again. She's looking at the book, and she's kind of like still in disbelief. She's, even though I told her like almost 2 hours ago about that it's there, she almost couldn't believe that it's there, right? Like, and so when she got it out, she started twirling in her hands and just like flipping the pages, and just completely excited. And she's kind of like, what? Like, how did you kept asking me? How did you know that I wanted this book so much? How did you know that like you sort of you brought it that for me? It's almost like that feeling of how this man can know something about me if we just met. And I just like sort of, I don't exactly remember what I replied, but something along the lines that this is sort of my spiritual abilities, and this is something that I do, and it just like I felt intuitive that you will like it, like there's something in there. I didn't know the deepest extent of how profound our connection is to that lyric, to these rhymes, but kind of like we sort of, with that excitement, we kind of like both recognized it. And sort of once I put my shoes on and my leather jacket on, she kind of like approached me slowly, softly on her tiptoes almost, and kind of like looked me in the eyes, and then she sort of took my leather jacket and zipped it for me. And when she zipped it all the way up, she kind of like adjusted my collar, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Here you go. I don't want you to get cold there." And it was, again, this very, very nurturing, caring, and intimate moment of her being truly in her feminine power, and just being very sort of girlish and feminine, and just caring. I don't know, was also quite a romantic moment for me, that I couldn't sort of stop thinking about on my way back. And when I was walking back, the rain started to fall, and I didn't have the umbrella, and I don't use the umbrellas at all, and then I just like started to sort of almost singing the melody from Singing in the Rain, and just like sort of swirling around and like dancing through the intersections and streets. It was like the city was empty, but it was sort of this incredible feeling of like, yeah, I'm in love, and I met my soulmate, and this is the reason. But I was mainly so excited because I was kind of like, at least finally I have my answers why I came here. One of the reasons why I came here is to meet her. Like was that kind of like a just knowing that. And of course I had all the thoughts in my head that like I can't pay for another session with her. I don't, it's impossible to sort of like get our relationship from that companion provider client container to sort of like be as a whatever, girlfriend and boyfriend or just friends. There was no pathway to get there, and I realized that in my head, but I was still kind of, we met for this higher reason, and we sort of like we're gonna be in each other's life, that kind of like a feeling. And so I went home and had my cup of tea, sitting listening to normal fucking Rockwell on vinyl, and just like kind of enjoying that I trusted my intuition to buy that book, and that I just felt the connection. I just felt how sort of the vibrations of appreciation she was sending my way. And sort of like I quite happy. I sort of went back to sleep. I was completely tired, but I kind of like just switched off the light, got under my blanket, closed my eyes, and kind of just said out loud, "Good night, Jessica, I love you." And right at that moment, I heard the voice back saying to me, "Good night, Alex, I love you too." And I sort of just brushed it off because I was so tired. I just like wasn't sure if I was imagining things, but that was her soul sort of telling me that. And it's also important to understand that like when sort of Jessica was already losing her soul at that moment, so she was kind of like in between states, and she still had her soul, but that when she said, "I know you," it wasn't her speaking, it was her soul almost like sending to me a distressing code, because these words, "I know you," created this reality for me where I was convinced that there's more between us, that she is switching our connection to more personal rather than professional, because you wouldn't say something like that to a client just like sort of without any sort of explanation or the follow-up, or sort of kind of that was my understanding, that she made that jump into another form of our engagement by saying these words. That's just how I perceived it. That was sort of my reality of like my way of sort of seeing that, and I didn't understand that it was the distress code from her soul, that she was basically just creating this reality for me so I would perceive it as more personal rather than just like being this like strict exchange of service. And so I went to bed completely exhausted, and that night in itself just changed my world yet again. And it was this kind of this how it started. All my shamanic awakening journey was that I was learning more in 1 week that I would learn normally in 1 month. I would learn more in 1 day that I would sort of learn in 1 week. It was such a dense and intense period of my life, and all these things were happening at once. But that was something that I was completely unprepared for. And so in that dream, I'm seeing the real life event of how Eloise, or the past embodiment of Jessica, was murdered in that past life. So something that I just seen as a glimpse in the bedroom right now, since I kind of fall in love with her and we opened this spiritual connection, another level of my clairvoyant talents opened up because some of my heart walls fell, because I allowed myself to fall in love, and that love was also a reward for the dedication on my spiritual path. It was exactly the same as it was with Veronica. It's I completed some part of my work, and to be able to ascend and to be able to move further and to elevate in my talents, I had to fall in love, because the love sort of opened up a next level of my abilities. And that's the nature of unconditional love, is that it can then be developed into something more solid, romantic, or tangible, or commitment, right? But the nature of unconditional love is that it doesn't want anything from anybody and just exists on its own, and it's just a person can claim that love if they want to. But I claimed that love right from the moment that I saw her eyes, maybe even before that when I saw her soul, right? So in the dream, I'm seeing exactly how the entire scene, how it played out, almost from the soul's perspective. So I'm seeing this room in the Paris apartment, and then Eloise is there with a client, and that she poisoned that man, but then there's another man coming into the space, and he's completely demonically possessed. He's not a real man. He has lost soul. He has an entity or evil spirit in him, and his eyes just reflect that. He's completely not a person. It's just a entity or being of the lower realms that uses his body. And Eloise doesn't know this man, but he basically creates this occult ritual where he starts to stab her in the left shoulder, and then starts to peel her skin away, and there's a bunch of blood and just flowing from her body, and this is feeling the floor, and they both lying there. And that guy that she poisoned, because she's screaming and this man is screaming, and the guy that she's poisoned, he's barely still alive, but he reaches for the gun and he kills that demonically possessed man. And so there's this a crazy scene which I'm seeing almost from the ceiling, where these 3 people died, but the most importantly Jessica is murdered, in my perception, right? I'm seeing her as Jessica. I'm seeing this I still don't know that her name is Eloise, but I'm kind of this is I'm seeing something that happened in real life, and I'm seeing this completely tormented Jessica's body with these scars and just with this amount of blood, and I'm completely freaking out. And so I observe this scene, and I'm understanding that it's all happened for real, and then I wake up. But the thing is that I'm not waking up as me, Alex, here in this apartment, but I'm waking up as Camilla, and I'm just and Camilla is completely freaked out. She sort of starts crying. She goes on the balcony, and I'm seeing the Paris of 1938, and she's completely confused, and she doesn't know what to make of it. But basically, she was ahead of the Wehrmacht operations in Paris, and Eloise was her main asset, but also love of her life and her lover. And Eloise was the most masterful and skilled spy. And then once sort of the Soviets elevated the stakes and started to kill sort of Wehrmacht agents, we had to retaliate, and then Eloise turned into most sophisticated and kind of a smart killer, and she never failed. And so that's why the most challenging missions were always executed by Eloise, but Camilla always planned all these missions in detail, and she never failed as well. And so Camilla is like freaking out because she's basically sent Eloise on the assignment last night, and before they separated, when she sent her, she kind of like they told each other that they love each other, and they like were holding hands, and this memory is also started to like be part of that dream. And so Camilla is basically standing on the balcony, and she realizes that Eloise is dead, that she was seeing in her dream how she was killed in detail from the soul level. So because she was sort of like this, again, the spiritual guide of death, and like being having this clairvoyant talent, but also that like that I know Jessica's soul from 7 past lives, and because of this deep connection, while Camilla was asleep, her soul was sort of supporting Eloise, right? Like, that's why her soul saw everything, how it happened, from this vantage point, because she was sort of like trying to help her, but like this thing played out in this way. And Camilla started to think that like this third man should never been in the apartment, and how this all played out. And then she sort of like started to cry, and like just crying and crying from kind of just having this knowing. Nobody like called her, nobody reported that. She just had this knowing that like Eloise is dead. And it's always like that with our soulmates, right? Like we sort of sense the energy body, we sense when something is wrong with them, when something happens, and sort of we can feel them. And so Camilla cries, and she has this like intuitive feeling. She just knows that Eloise is dead. She doesn't have confirmation, but she's kind of like just the tears. She can't stop the tears. And then I wake up as Alex in my apartment. Sort of, I wake up completely freaked out. I wake up completely confused and tortured, and like just feeling this grief, like, and just feeling that it's Camilla's grief is my grief, and it's like the same grief, and just like the tears just start pour out from me right away as I woke up, and I like just couldn't stop for like a couple of hours, and I just crying and crying, because like it was that the grief, the loss, the separation, the trauma, the demonic nature of the way that Eloise died, and just accepting that kind of a destiny for somebody, doesn't matter who they are, like it's still sort of, it's one thing she killed people with poison, like it's another thing to sort of like be murdered in this way. But the most importantly, I kind of realized that she wasn't murdered by a man, that she was murdered by a demon. And that was also sort of very sort of spooky and out of this world. And it was just knowing that this man somehow knew, because he was a demon, right? Like, because he knew how to make this, not just kill her, but make it as an occult ritual, for some kind of a spiritual purpose, of kind of like sort of trap her soul, and kind of sort of infuse more demons into her upon death. And so that's why Jessica was sort of like living in that space, right? Like that's why she was disconnected with her soul, because her soul was living in that trauma. That's why her soul was like sort of calling upon me and summoning me. That's why the guidance was like so kind of like rushed, right? Like this, that you have to meet an escort was that request of her soul trying to summon me. And I'm crying like from this grief, and then I'm also like start to cry happy tears, just like right in the middle, out of it. And then I'm kind of like, oh, okay, Eloise, like Jessica is dead, I lost her, but I found her, like she's alive right now as Jessica, and Eloise is alive right now. She transcended death, our love transcended death. And just from it's kind of like being overwhelmed with coincidences and magic of this moment, and magic of our connection, that our love transcended death, and that like I discovered her, and I know her, and I love her. And I started to cry happy tears, from that. But then of course I immediately descended into this like next stage of, I found Eloise, but I can't see her, and the only way for me to see her was to pay her money, right? Like, but I didn't have any money. And I also like didn't want to be her client as well. Like I just wanted to like be her friend or her boyfriend, or like whatever she would sort of, like I would have accepted any connection, literally, that she would allow me to have, I would accept it to be part of her life on any terms. If it was just, one sort of coffee a year or something like that, like doesn't really matter. but just be in her life in some form, like just experience her, like understand her, like just like learn her personality, learn what kind of person she is. Because I was in the space of knowing that we would not probably work because of our age difference, and I wouldn't be kind of like feeling comfortable, let's say it like that, with that age difference. Again, it's nothing like she was mature and advanced beyond her years. It's not like her sort of the critique of her essence. It's more so my sort of perception, how I felt about it. That I couldn't see, I couldn't like sort of imagine the empowering sort of union in that form with her. But because I had these like romantic feelings, and I also have to add that I never fell in love with Jessica as Alexander, as me, as a man, Alexander in this body. My love for Jessica was always Camilla's love for Eloise. It's just because it was sort of cut short by that traumatic death, and that it never played out and never was sort of fulfilled, right? It spilled out into this next life. And so my love for her was always the love of Camilla. That's why I was like feeling so drawn to her. That's why I wanted to like sort of heal her energy body. That's why I sort of like wanted to save her, right? Like because it was the extension of Camilla's love, because she lost her. So that was this kind of like, oh, if I lost her there, I'm gonna like sort of save and protect her now. And just knowing, like having this realization, kind of like I'm not gonna see this woman ever again, and just like started to cry and cry and cry, and like just couldn't stop, and like nothing that I would do would stop those tears. And sort of, I think like a few hours later, I think I started to listen to Lana Del Rey. Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. I was thinking that like, yeah, her music would sort of calm me down. And I don't even remember, it was some kind of like a playlist. I usually listen to Lana in albums, and like rarely did I ever listen to her on a playlist, but I think it was just something random that happened, and just like these songs playing out, and I have these like sort of complex romantic emotions, and Lana kind of supports them with her songs, and I'm starting to sort of like my tears start to sort of slow down, and then the Tomorrow Never Came song comes into my space all of a sudden once the tears ran out. And once the song starts to play, I realize that the song is entirely about Camilla perception. And I started to cry again. And I'm seeing this rain that's being described in the song, and I'm like just feeling this rain. And I start to cry Camilla's tears, and I'm like sort of almost like close my eyes and find myself in another memory of Camilla's. And like when she sort of woke up on that day when Eloise was murdered, she was supposed to meet her later in the afternoon to kind of like to debrief the situation, you kind of like in like a secret spot. And so later in that day, even though Camilla knew that Eloise was dead intuitively, she was still kind of like wanted to confirm that, and she still hoped that they would meet in their designated spot, in their like place that they will always meet in the Luxembourg park of Paris, on a specific bench. So Camilla goes to that bench, even though she's completely assured that she knows what happened during that night, and she sits on that bench for a few hours, and the rain starts to drop. And so the lyrics in this in the song is that I waited for you in the place that we sort of agreed to meet, but you never came, and like tomorrow never came, right? Like sort of like this is the, I don't exactly remember the lyrics, but like the entire sort of the entire part of that lyric felt as if Camilla wrote it about Eloise. It was just like you couldn't like even change the word. It was so perfectly capturing her state of emotions and feelings. And sort of course, like tomorrow never came for Eloise. If sort of we sort of have this metaphor, And so the songs, so I'm seeing that image, and then I'm returning back to my apartment, and I'm crying again, and like just don't know what to do, and kind of like just very confused. And I'm sort of start to pray, like what do I do next? And I sort of invite my guides. So Wilhelm comes, this my father's soul, a little bit in the distance. Mary Magdalene comes also. I just don't really feel her, and I also sort of like I feel the presence of angels. It's almost like a group of beings came into my space to support me, to kind of like just calm me down, to reassure me that everything is unraveling in the way that it's supposed to unravel. There is nothing wrong actually happening. It's just the intense emotions that I'm experiencing. And so I'm started to have the dialogue with Wilhelm, and he kind of like channels the entire guidance of the entire team. And he basically I kind of understood it of myself, and I'm saying, oh, I probably never see this woman ever again, or something like that. And he basically says, you're going to see her in 6 weeks for another dinner date, and we will provide you the date closer to that time, but it will happen around Jessica's birthday, and that you will have to pay for that 4-hour dinner date again, and that you will have to buy her a birthday present, and after that you would not see her again. And it was kind of like related to, like, it was said in these words of kind of like very confusing words, like your story would continue in 3 years or something like that. But I basically read it as if like I'll see her again in 3 years. Like I made myself believe that. So I'm reading this guidance as if I would be able to see Jessica, because when Wilhelm told me that I won't see her after another date, I was like sort of in complete denial, right? Like, because I was kind of, I couldn't even wait for another day, like I was just like, I wanted to like just run to her, like bring her coffee in the bed or something, or like go for breakfast, or just go for a walk, or like do something, I couldn't even like spend one minute without her. I was so drawn to her, and just this love was so intense. And when he said that you're gonna see her again only in 6 weeks, I'm kind of like, I'm not gonna like survive 6 weeks without her. But when he's out after that, he said that like then you won't see her ever again, which I read as you would see her in 3 years, right? Like that just was something that I wanted to believe in. That's some like kind of like a hope, at least. And then I kind of immediately just knew why it had to be like that. I kind of started to even explain my story to Wilhelm, like just out loud for myself, to just sort of to make sure that I understand it correctly, right? Like, and I started to tell that, I intuitively feel that I won't see her for that long time, that like I won't see her again, because she's supposed to be dead for me, because I never in my past lives could accept her death. It was always traumatizing event for me. So right now I would live in this kind of like a world where I would, like, even though she would be alive, I would feel as if she's dead, to be able to sort of heal that grief of constantly losing her. And the only way to be able to do that is that like I wouldn't see her, so it would feel for my heart as if she's not alive. Right, there's no communication, no nothing. I knew that this is the purpose of that story, why the story is supposed to be like that. I just knew that, even though I still didn't know how, like I just saw her one death, and it was only one instance, and the grief was so intense. But it's that's the thing, is that like it was not the single occurrence. It was a repetitive pattern between two of us, is that she dies tragically, and then I kind of can't bury her and can't accept that. And it's always it fucked me up in every single life, basically, right? Like all of my past incarnations were not themselves after Jessica in her previous incarnations would die upon me. And so this, how it was specifically structured, this container, why we didn't meet in like real life if we're supposed to meet, right? Like when we met in this container, is that like I wouldn't have any ways to reach out for her or meet her, and she would also sort of like won't reach for me because I'm a client. And so And I kind of like also when Wilhelm told me that you will see her in 6 weeks and you'll sort of have another dinner date and buy her present, I'm kind of like, it's even more expensive that I paid this time. I don't have these money at all. And they're like, oh, we only had like two grand left on the savings account and just couldn't just spend it all here. And Wilhelm told me that, and my contract was expiring, I think like late November or something, and I didn't have anything else lined up after that. And usually the film business goes on a break like from late December to like end of January or even February, just this Christmas sort of time. And so I wouldn't be able to like ask Veronica again for money, and I don't have any contract to line up. So how do you like sort of imagine this date happening? And Wilhelm told me, we will give you a longer, like we'll help to give you a longer contract, and like you will be covered. Basically, you will have money for that second day. Just be prepared for it and just sort of like allow your story to unfold and process whatever is happening. But this is sort of like how it would be. And on that day, we kind of Veronica sold her painting just that week, which kind of happens, but not to the extent that she wishes or I wish it to happen. But it's like at least something sometimes. And we kind of decided to go to the restaurant that we liked on our area, just to sort of talk about that and just sort of have, I don't know, that was our plan sort of thing. I don't even remember why we decided it to be like that. And she spent the previous night with Brian, and so she sort of like came back, and we decided to before the working week to go for dinner. And sort of, and I've been to that restaurant before, Red Accordion, but this time I'm stepping in and Veronica is already at her table, and there is like sort of like a lounge area in the fireplace, like more sort of informal table setting. They have a different room with more regular tables, but this one is like a different. And I always liked that place because it did have this like a Paris kind of like French charm, and the food was sort of similar. The cocktails, the way that they sort of did things, was quite similar to sort of Paris. And I go to the table and I like see Veronica like sort of say hi, and I immediately start cry again, just tears pouring out of me. And I realized that this restaurant looked very familiar to the French restaurant that Camilla and Philip met when Camilla told Philip that Jessica was killed. And sort of here I was again sort of in this another rhyming situation, and again the restaurant and design of Red Accordion like was so familiar to that French restaurant of 1930s. It was such a intense kind of like a feeling. And then I would discover that this restaurant had a reference to like the design of that restaurant had a reference to another life. So it was just like a very significant place for me. And I talk to the spirits of the land under that restaurant every single time that I come to that place. I really do have the occurrence like to be able to visit it, but it's like a very significant and spiritual place for me. Like there's like a lot of layers and elements to that place. And so yeah, again I'm crying, and I'm like just started to tell Veronica that like everything happened the way that you told it would happen. I fell in love with her. I don't know what to do. I was giving this guidance that I would see her again, and like blah blah blah. Like I'm just trying to describe how it occurred. And then I also telling her the dream that I had, like while I was sort of in between, after I cried my tears in the morning, and before the restaurant I had this vision, another vision, when I'm seeing Jessica sort of living in the house somewhere like sort of in the British Columbia in the woods, and sort of having a son and a daughter, and sort of sending them off to school. And then there is like a kind of like a man is present there, and he's kind of like loving and supportive. And so in that second vision, I'm seeing us alone in a similar looking house, and we're just sitting at the table in the morning after talking throughout the night. And she kind of like looks at me, and she looks like older, as if like not a little bit like herself. And there was nobody else in the house, and she reaches to my hand, and we're kind of like sitting in silence and looking at each other. And she reaches to my hand, and she's kind of like, and she's saying something along. It felt like she was telling that to me with her thoughts rather than words. But I heard how she's saying, "Thank you for being there for me. Thank you for not abandoning me. I really appreciate that you were there for me when I needed you." That kind of thing, like that. That you guided me through the darkness, something of that sort. That you never left me when I was in the dark. That kind of something along that lines. And like I read the entire thing as if it's kind of like Jessica, just in different times. But I was seeing in that second vision, where we're just alone together with this woman, I was actually seeing my twin flame, the third woman that I would meet on my path. And of course I couldn't like discern that guidance. I couldn't discern those visions, not only because I was sort of inexperienced, but because I was only thinking about one woman, right? Like, and I was so in love with her that I was like convinced that we sort of one day we'll be together, right? Like this is sort of the dream, the aspiration of my romantic love. That's just, I kind of, maybe even though I can't see myself with Jessica, knowing her values and like being her younger, and that I can't provide her the lifestyle, somehow we will still end up together. That kind of like was my thought. But of course, that image of like the man being almost not me, and feeling as if it's not me, I also read it as if, I just came to visit her, and that like I did the work that's required, but we kind of like didn't end up together. But she's alive, and she lived her full life, and she's basically just sort of meeting me as a friend, but she actually has the different husband, right? Like this was also that I was leaning into that interpretation more at that moment. Even though again I was sort of wanting to see it differently, and again the first vision when I saw the children was, I was feeling as if completely like just friend of the family and just like visiting them randomly. Whether in the second image where we're like sitting together, there was intimacy and romance, and we just kind of like almost in our twilight years, kind of reminiscing on our life and kind of just like almost saying goodbye before death. And just because I didn't know how my twin flame looked like, and at the same time they share the same, both women share the same archetypical essence of Magdalene soul, so they carry the same light into the world. Even though they have distinctly different personalities, even in on a soul level, and they represent different spectrum of the Magdalene light. It's still in the visions it felt like the same person, or just like I made myself believe in that, right? Like again, something that very sort of, when you're only starting with these channelings, visions, clairvoyance, all these things, some things that are just confusing, and you need to understand how they work. But I was also kind of like, this dream would not arrive in my space if it wasn't about Jessica, right? Like this was sort of my perception. And when I came to the restaurant with Veronica, I started to cry, and I started to tell all these things about this dream. And I was crying mostly because I was kind of like, I sent Eloise to die, and she had a short life because of me, and she never experienced motherhood. And so it's my job and my purpose and my destiny in this life to give that to Jessica, to do something to heal her, to help her, to assist her, to like empower her in any way that I can, even though I didn't know what was ahead of me or how I would be able to heal her if I can't see her. It was this like intense feeling that if I would be able to heal her, she would have that happiness of the family and of the motherhood. And it literally didn't matter for me if I would be the father of these children or not, and if I would be her husband or not. I was just wanting that for her. That was the only passionate desire that I had, and that was the only expression of my unconditional love to this woman. It was manifesting in that. I was literally okay with her having the different men in her life and having children with him, because she looked happy in those visions, and so that's the only thing that kind of mattered for me. And if I could be just like this friend or whoever, or not maybe see her at all, I started to accept that, but for me that was I kept telling Veronica that this is my purpose and this is something that I want to give to Jessica, that I want to give her this ability to have happy, fulfilling life, but mostly that I just felt that she would be, that in her specific instance, in her specific case, that she would be empowered and joyful through experiencing the motherhood. And I couldn't understand why I was feeling that and why I was telling that. And of course it was related to her two previous lives, like the life of Eloise and the life of Polly, where she sort of lost, where she as Eloise she never experienced pregnancy, but as Polly she lost her children and died young, so she also didn't experience the joy of motherhood. And so I was feeling all of that, and I was just kind of it was tearing me apart. And that I was I'll do anything, I'll do literally anything, but just to get her there. And this is my mission, my destiny, and it's my way to pay her karmic debt on sending her to death in past life, because I was the guilt and shame was such intense as well in me, because I assumed all of that through these dreams and through that connection to Jessica's soul. I assumed all that guilt that Camilla was having from being feeling responsible for sending Jessica to die, sending Eloise to die. And of course the things played out the way that it should have, and we eventually found out that Eloise died in the most empowering way, and she should have died like that, and there were spiritual reasons why she died like that. But still Camilla made herself believe that she's responsible for that death, and that all these feelings were just rushed to me, and I was sort of in charge of them right now, and sort of being a recipient of that, and just carrying them in me. And this dream was that how it sort of manifested. I just wanted the best for Jessica. So this is the end of our 5th episode, and I hope to see you in the following ones, where I will continue to tell the story of my shamanic awakening.